I'm an ADHD coach that works primarily with high achievers, like people who want to do stuff in this world, but they get in their own way. And one of the most common struggles that across the board I hear from my clients is this inability to do things or to get themselves to do things, even when they want to do things. So I've done several videos on making sure that the things you think you want to do are actually the things you want to do, because very often we're working from a place of should. And if you have an ADHD brain that is predominantly interest-based, if you are not like interested in the process and the outcome, it's going to be really hard to get yourself to do things. But my clients are like, I want to do this thing. Like I want to start this business or run this marathon or get my taxes done. These things are really important to me. So they have the emotional connection. It's not coming from a place of should. It is definitely an intrinsic want. And yet they still can't get themselves to actually do the thing. And there's a couple of reasons for that. A lot of it can come down to executive function issues getting in the way, overwhelm, or not being able to prioritize what the next step is. Like all of the steps appear in your brain at once and it's, I don't know what to even start with or think about first. And then of course, there's things like working memory issues where we temporarily forget what it is we want. And then all of the head trash that comes with living with ADHD your entire life. Shame spirals, fear of rejection, fear of failure. Like I could go on, but I probably don't have to tell you about those experiences that get in your way when you want to really do something, but you can't get yourself to do it. But have no fear, because there's always ways that you can get around this issue. And I'm not talking about medication or hiring a coach or a therapist, although all of those things are great too. I'm talking about tactical strategies that you can put in place to ensure that you get started and actually follow through. I can't guarantee that you'll get the outcome that you want, but I'm pretty sure that if you put in place all of the tactical suggestions I'm going to share with you today, you will make considerable progress in the direction that you want to go. So on that note, let's get into it. All right, before I give you the strategies, I want to frame this around an example of something in my own life and how I'm using these strategies to actually do what it is I know I want to do, but really don't want to do. The problem is that I don't like the process. I want the outcome, but the process bores the bejeebers out of me. So much so that it is really just like, it takes everything for me to actually do the thing. So I know that not only do I need to implement these strategies to actually do the thing, I also need to figure out a way to make the process less sucky. Because quite honestly, if you know you need to adopt a behavior for the rest of your life, but you hate that behavior, brute force is not going to get you very far. And the struggle that I'm having is around weightlifting. The problem is not really around working out per se, because I work out all the time, but I'm more of a yoga, Pilates, bar kind of girl, not really someone who loves to be in the gym. In fact, if I'm being honest, I freaking hate it. However, at the age of 55, I'm really starting to notice that my body composition is changing. And I'm not even talking about aesthetics here or fitting into a pair of jeans or whatever. I'm talking about my functional strength. I'm starting to notice that my muscles are deteriorating. And when muscles deteriorate, body fat seems to want to take its place. And that can lead to a number of issues down the road. I've seen the science, I've seen the research. I know that if I want to live healthfully and fully function well into my 80s or 90s, however long I get to live, I have to start weight training. But I don't want to. And I've been on the struggle bus with this for a long time until now. So I'm going to show you what I have done in my environment and in my life to set myself up for success, and also to help me reframe this hatred I have of weightlifting. So whatever issue you're dealing with, just swap it out for my weightlifting hatred. And by the way, everything on this list has been designed for the ADHD brain, knowing that we have interest-driven brains, we have insatiable curiosity, we love novelty, reward, anything that helps us boost our dopamine so that we can keep moving forward and gaining momentum is included on this list. So the first one is finding role models around whatever it is you want to accomplish, both from the perspective of the outcome that you want, but also the process of how you need to get there. So for me, that means finding people my age or older with a really solid level of physical fitness that I would aspire to, that I can watch and follow and emulate the behaviors that they do in order to get that outcome. So, for example, a great one for me is Train with Joan. She's a woman in her 70s, started lifting in her early 70s. I think she's in her mid or late 70s now. And she looks freaking amazing. And the transformation she's had is amazing. And for me, filling up my social media feed with people that I aspire to be like and who I want to follow and emulate is the first step in learning to appreciate the process and also get excited for the outcome. The next step is to get emotionally connected to whatever the outcome is that you want and play on both your fears and desires. My biggest fear is just physically wasting away to the point where I can't take care of myself anymore and I end up in a nursing home before my time. I may end up there anyway, but in my mind, quality of life is even more important to me than just longevity. And my desire is to not only look great and feel great and mentally be with it as an older adult, but be able to do the things I want to do. Pick up my suitcase and throw it in the overhead bin when I'm on an airplane by myself when I'm in my 80s. So I have some visuals in my mind that are very tangible around what I'm afraid of and what I really want. And so far, that's enough of an emotional connection for me to do the work, even though I still don't like doing it at all. So your next job here is to really think about why you want this. What are you afraid of? What do you truly want? And make sure that those desires are enough to propel you forward into action. The next one is reducing friction, which is super important for the ADHD brain because we have a tendency to overcomplicate things, then we get overwhelmed and we don't follow through. So in the context of working out, I've always found that if I can work out in my house, I'll get it done because I don't need to put on clothes and get in the car and go somewhere. Hate doing that. So working out at home has always been really successful for me. Now, as I'm trying to bring in more weight training, I do have some equipment at home, but it's only going to take me so far. But for the time being, I'm going to continue doing my workouts at home because it's low friction. I don't need to think about anything else other than getting those exercises done and checking it off my list and moving on with my day. So whatever you're struggling with, think through all of the things getting in the way of what it is you want to do and look for alternatives that are at least a little bit easier if you can't remove them completely. The next thing is input tracking. And when it comes to lifting weights or exercise, you might think what I would want to track is my measurements or my weight on the scale or something like that. And that is not what I mean at all. What I mean instead is tracking your actual behavior. So did I get my one lower body workout this week? Did I get my upper body workout this week? Those are the only two things that are really important to track. And beyond that, I might want to track the actual weights that I'm using to see if I'm gaining strength, but I am not tracking body weight metrics at all or taking before and after pictures because I can't control that. I can only control my behaviors, not how my body responds. And tracking your input progress on a day-to-day basis is probably the best way to motivate yourself and continue to build momentum and dopamine towards whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So get yourself a good habit tracker and start checking off every day that you do something you say you're going to do. Trust me, squirts of dopamine will come from that behavior alone. The next tactic is learning as fuel. And what I mean by that is really starting to nerd out on whatever it is you want so that you can start to love the process. Now, ADHDers tend to be highly curious. So if I geek out on something, I will be much more likely to immerse myself in it. And that will help me enjoy the process a bit more so it doesn't suck quite so bad. So I've started to look for experts in the field of women's strength training, especially as you age. I found a few that I will link below. And I personally find that the more I follow these folks and let their knowledge sink in, the more excited I am to actually do the work. Okay, the next one is super important for the ADHD brain, and that is to try and make the process as enjoyable as possible. When I was a fitness trainer, I used to tell people to hold their favorite podcast or their favorite shows for when they're working out so that it would be something that they could look forward to during the experience, or making the environment that you do your thing in as peaceful and enjoyable as you possibly can make it. Because you'd be surprised how much of behavior change is actually dependent on the environment that you're in. So if you're trying to build a business, but your environment is messy and you're doing it on the kitchen table and people around you screaming and you just don't have like a designated space for yourself, it's going to be a lot harder than if you just carved out a small corner of a room where you could have a desk and your own setup that is yours and you can continue coming back to. It makes a world of difference. So for me, I have a small gym downstairs with some equipment. I know that just like a few potted plants and some pictures will go a long way to making that space just a little bit more inviting because it's just cold and dungeness right now. The next point I'm going to make is really important for those of us with ADHD who have outsized expectations of what is humanly possible to do. And that is to align your behaviors or whatever it is you're trying to do with your current self, not your future self. And here's what I mean by that. The ADHD brain is often propelled by perfectionism, right? So when we want to do something, we don't want to start at the starting line. We want to start like midway down the course and assume that we can just catch up to wherever we think we should be in life. And I know a lot of you can relate to this. But here's what happens when we do that. We set ourselves up for failure because we're not meeting ourselves where we are. We're not being realistic about what we can possibly do in the moment versus what we can do 2-3 years down the line because our brain doesn't want to think about things that far in advance. We want results now. So we figure if we push ourselves farther, we'll get to our destination faster. But what ends up happening is we push ourselves right over a cliff, right into burnout. So instead of doing that, when it comes to weight training, for example, I'm not going to start with what I think I should be able to do because I'm somebody who's been working out regularly a good portion of my life. I'm going to start with a beginner mind, which is what all the mindful folks say you should do anyway. And I'm not going to push myself too far because I've done that in the past and picked up far too much weight on a day where I was feeling really good. And then I couldn't walk for a week after. So instead, I'm going to take things slow and gradual and remind myself that this is a marathon, not a sprint, so I can start at the beginning and just keep trucking forward. Okay, the next one is novelty resets. And here's the thing, no matter how much I plan and structure and meet myself where I am, all of those things, I'm going to get to a point where this is boring AF and I'm probably going to want to drop it like a hot potato. So I know that at some point I will need to refresh things. And that can mean changing my workout or changing some of my role models or changing where I do my workout, something like that. Even if it feels meaningless or minuscule, very often just small adjustments can resparkleize a behavior so that you can keep moving forward with it rather than tossing all of the great work you've done aside because the behavior's starting to get too boring. Our brains don't have as much dopamine as the average neurotypical. So we need to find our dopamine elsewhere through novelty or urgency or body doubling. Switch it up as needed to make sure that the essential behavior keeps going. And the last point is planning for evolution. Now, at this point, you have zhuzhed up your environment, you've made it novel, you've reduced the friction, and things get easier because the behaviors that you were training yourself on are now becoming habits and they become easier and easier. You have less head trash and you also see your own progress. When you start to see momentum, you want to think about where you want it to go with intention. You want to think about different milestones of what might be in the future, because if you don't do that, you run the risk of continuously moving your goalposts ahead and ahead so that you never celebrate wins, you never take a moment to appreciate how far you've come, and you're not measuring the gain, you're always just looking at the gap. Thinking about that book from Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan. You want to be able to pause once in a while and look back and appreciate how far you've actually come, because that action is imperative to changing your self-identity as someone who says they're going to do something and actually follows through with it. I hope you found those 9 tactics helpful. And here's the thing, if you say to me, Karen, I have to do all of those things just to do what it is I want to do. Yeah. And if you don't want to do all of these things to get the outcome that you want, maybe you just don't want it badly enough, and that is always okay too. So I will leave you with that. Thanks again for being here, guys, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.